Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this very special edition of the NCMA Film Club. My name is Maria Lopez, and I'm the manager of film and lecture programs at the North Carolina Museum of Art. We understand this type of virtual programming is new to many, and we just want to thank you for your support of the NCMA and its new endeavors. I know this experience is not the same as watching a film collectively in a theater, but we hope events like this can help fill the void until it is safe to have on-site film screenings again. Tonight is a very special night in which we are celebrating Laura Boyes for her 20 years as film curator at the NCMA through this virtual film screening with live music accompaniment. I'd like to give a brief overview of our program and go over a few tips and guidelines. This virtual event will last a little under 2 hours. Laura Boyes will give an introduction to the film and will also introduce the film's accompanist, David Drazen. Then we'll begin the film. After the film ends, please be sure to stay for a short 15 to 20-minute Q&A session with Laura and David. You can enter any questions or comments for Laura Boyes and or David Drazen in the chat. Whether you're tuning in on Zoom or YouTube, I'll be sharing the comments and questions from the chat with them during this Q&A session. Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the NCMA's film curator, Laura Boyes. Welcome, Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, thank you so much, Maria. Maria has been truly heroic in getting this whole event going, and I'm very, very appreciative of everything she's done to make this 21st century Nickelodeon happen. First, I'm going to give a little introduction to the film. I wish I could see all the faces of the old and new friends of the museum, but I'll just have to imagine everyone here. Buster Keaton was born into his family's roughhouse vaudeville comedy act. Buster's role was as human mop. His father tossed him around the stage, and the youngest Keaton's ability to take any fall or Buster without harm made the act a huge success. He never attended school and spent his youth evading the social services that sought to separate him from his performing career. After the five Keatons broke up, partly as a result of his father's alcoholism, a chance encounter on a New York City street, and a day of improvising on the set of a Fatty Arbuckle two-reel comedy changed his life. He was smitten with the movies. Keaton and Arbuckle made 15 short comedies between 1917 and 1920. Keaton increasingly shared the director's chores with Arbuckle, at the time one of movies' top comedy stars. Offered his own studio by Professor Joseph Schenck, Keaton embarked on a decade of two-reel and feature comedies unmatched for their uniquely audacious humor. In 1 week, a do-it-yourself, build-your-own-home kit becomes the center of a surrealist storm. Walter Carr said of his debut film, In the Silent Clowns, one of the important books written about silent comedy, from the very first film that Keaton released as a star, once his association with Arbuckle was ended, it was breathtaking, an explosion of style. To sit through dozens and dozens of short comedies of the period, and then to come upon 1 week is to see the one thing no man ever sees, a garden at the moment of blooming. Steamboat Bill Jr. was at the end of his independent career, the last feature before his by then brother-in-law, Joseph Schenck, sold his contract to MGM. His name may not appear in the credits other than as an actor, but as always, he's the primary creative force behind the film. The story is strongly autobiographical, echoing his relationship with his own father, here played by Ernest Torrance, and it contains a sequence set in a theater which evokes his vaudeville origins. The ending references an apocryphal story that Joe Keaton used to talk about his son, that as a baby he was sucked out a window by a tornado. Shooting by the banks of the Sacramento River in Northern California, the beautiful photography evokes those of his historical films, The General and Our Hospitality. Like those films, it contains some Confederate iconography. The boat, after all, is made called the Stonewall Jackson. The 1930s was a time of romanticizing the South and the lost cause, the primary artifact being, of course, the novel and book Gone with the Wind. It also contains, sadly, some mildly racist jokes, which I hope you will overlook. The film had originally ended with a massive flood, but his supervising producer demanded that he change it because it would remind audiences of the recently destructive Mississippi floods, which pushed the button higher than any of Keaton's previous films. At first, furious by the intervention of the front office, he went on to construct the most memorable finale of any of his films. Cables ripped sets apart, airplane engines created fierce winds, and cranes lifted debris into the air. The most dangerous stunt in his entire career you will surely recognize, as it appeared in a couple of Keaton's earlier films as a gentler incarnation, and has also been quoted in comedy films for nearly a century. The front of a house crashes down over him, and he is left standing only because of his alignment with an upstairs window. He only had a couple of inches of clearance in any direction, and the house was weighted so that it would not blow away in the gale. He could easily have been crushed by a ton of falling set, and supposedly the director could not watch the stunt being filmed. He only had a couple of inches of clearance, so it was an extremely dangerous stunt. Some authors have it that Keaton had just been told that his career as an independent artist was over and that he didn't care if he lived or died. I was mad at the time, or I never would have done the thing, he told one writer, but he told another one that the stunt was one of the greatest thrills of his life. Much fun is made of Bill Jr.'s college foppery, his pencil-lined mustache, his beret, and his Oxford bag wide leg pants. He reunites with a female friend in a barber shop because at that time, ladies' hairdressers did not bob or cut short women's hair and would not deal with women who did not have long hair. On display, as always, is his extraordinary athletic ability. He does all his own stunts, which was true throughout his silent career. He has the skills of a circus acrobat or an Olympic gymnast. And remember that there are no laboratory special effects. Every trick was done in the camera, if necessary, by the use of precise measurements, sometimes using surveyor's instruments. And every set is full size. There are no models. These films were entirely busters. He sometimes had a nominal director and a team of gag writers, but he was the central creative force, a star both in front of and behind the camera. He even built many of the props for his films until an accident with a moving staircase on one of his earlier short films resulted in the studio insisting that he hire a technical director. He relied on his creative team, director Charles Reisner, technical director Fred Gabori, and a cast of regular actors, often including family members, in this case his sister Louise, who doubles for the heroine. Although he was known as the Great Stone Face, his expressions are extremely subtle and communicate volumes. His face, in fact, embodies the peak of silent film acting. This movie cost over $400,000 to make and did not make a profit. Although modern filmgoers revere Keaton, in his day, many of his features, including The General, were flops. Although his first feature for MGM, The Cameraman, does seem like one of his distinctive independent films. Each successive feature at MGM came more and more under the thumb of the studio executives who thought they knew better than one of the cinema's great geniuses what sort of films he ought to be making. Of course, by 1927, Hollywood was also convulsing with the pressure of converting to sound, and Buster's career began to slide, complicated in no small way by his alcoholism, an echo of his father's. Luckily, he lived long enough to experience the revival of his career in the 1960s and to be acclaimed a genius, a status that he modestly poo-pooed. Our accompaniment tonight is by David Drazen, who's providing live music from his home in Evanston, Illinois. David, do you want to give a little wave there? As some of you may know, yes, he has his Buster Keaton tie on. As some of you may know, as well as being one of the world's foremost silent film accompanists, he is also my brother, and he's been creating scores since childhood, at first using Blackhawk 8mm films and a skillfully deployed record player. He is playing our mother's Steinway grand piano, and balancing the sound was one of the primary feats of learning how to do this live stream. He is currently working as a rehearsal pianist for the Evanston School of Ballet and also recording scores for Grapevine Video. He's just finished doing a 1920 serial, Son of Tarzan, the longest score he's ever recorded, but he's also done films for Grapevine like The Cossack Whip and The Innocence of Ruth. And if you're interested in hearing the kind of music David used to play, he was in a funk band called the Seeds of Fulfillment, which broke up in 1982. And you can stream it on Amazon Music. So if you would like to see, listen to the Seeds of Fulfillment, you may do that. So you're going to see David play a little bit at the beginning of the film, and then Maria is going to take his image out of the screen and we can just watch Buster. So take it away.
Wow, what an incredible show. Let's give David a round of applause, a virtual round of applause. That was fantastic.
Can you, you have to start my video.
Oh, yes, let me go ahead and there you are.
Woo.
How are you feeling?
Fine, thanks. A little drink of water.
Yeah, we're getting lots of comments here in the chat. David was amazing. Thank you for showing this. This was a treat. That was awesome. Great playing, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you. So let's just get right to it. I have a lot of questions. One of the first ones is for Laura, since this is a celebration of your 20 years as the curator of film at the NCMA. So how did you get this job?
So 20 years ago, a friend of mine told me that George Holt, who was the former director of film and music programming, was looking for someone to suggest some film titles that he might program. And after we spoke, I kind of invented this job because we decided even 20 years ago, it was very hard to get people out of their nice, comfortable houses into a theater. Now, of course, it's weirdly the opposite problem. And that by making it kind of more of a special event with a talk and really trying to build the community around the film program, that would be a way to have a really viable cinema going group at the North Carolina Museum of Art.
Great. And do you have a favorite memory or a memorable moment, a favorite screening perhaps from your 20 years? I know this is a difficult question, but.
Well, you know, there are moments from a lot of different screenings where everybody reacted all together in a group that is just so amazing. Like there was a showing of Peyton Place, which is this 1950s melodrama. And at one point, Lana Turner, who has been trying to be very good and moral, puts on a red dress. And when the entire audience saw her in a red dress, they all gasped because they knew that it, you know, meant that she was going to indulge in some wicked behavior. And there have been wonderful experiences with David at the museum too. I remember, I'm sure you remember this, David, playing for The Man Who Laughs.
Oh yeah.
And there's an extremely exciting chase at the end with a dog whose name I believe is Homo.
That's right.
Homo the dog, a German Shepherd. And there's a very exciting chase, and the audience was just so into it, like yelling and screaming, and it was just really, really wonderful.
Great, thank you, Laura. I did just get a question from Dargan Gilmore for David. How long did it take you to prepare for this?
64 years. But seriously, I'm sort of semi-prepared all the time because I play the piano all the time, but not for silent pictures all the time. So, but they're always circling through my thoughts. But in this case, I really buckled down, I think, after the practice session last Friday, because I learned a lot about how it works, how the streaming works. And I was really just relying on things that I played for other movies, other Buster Keaton movies. And I thought, I really got to change this. So I started thinking about it every day and coming up with stuff. And in fact, I was in a ballet class a couple of days ago playing for class, not taking ballet. I was playing for ballet. And crossed my mind of the seafaring songs, and that's where I got Life on the Ocean Wave.
Wow.
So I put in actually 16 measures of music that's written down, except I didn't play it like it says. I just learned it so that I could do what I wanted with it.
I also see a question on YouTube from Adrian Boys. This was so fun. Question, David, what's it like to play for a comedy versus a drama?
Comedy is harder because the Buster Keaton wants the laughs. So what often happens with silent film accompanists is they don't know how to really do comedy because they don't listen to all, and they can't play jazz of the 20s, though it was the actual jazz age. So what you get is kind of a rollicking drama. It's like he's in danger. So that's the way they play it. Like, how's he going to get out of this? You know, so it's like serious, only it's just like serious with a little Sammy Kaye or, you know, sweet band in it, but it comes out that way. So for me, I like to do the Harlem Stride, which was a jazz style of the 20s, but it's actually tougher because there's no records of anyone playing it for, like, The Chase is an entire reel. So, but supposedly Fats Waller and Count Basie played in movie houses. So there's plenty of precedent for imagining them doing that, if that's a word. They were jazz guys.
Well, David, what movies do you enjoy playing for the most?
I like Steamboat Bill Jr. But well, it's hard to say enjoy because I mean, what's fun is to sit back on the couch and eat food and watch, you know, cartoons and comedies and whatever you want. But playing the piano is like physical, so it's not like I don't have fun. But what was the question?
Is there a movie that you particularly enjoy playing for?
Oh, I think so. This is Paris. I really love playing for that one. And strangely enough, there's this serial made in France called Les Vampires by Louis Fouillade. And it's like 10 chapters and it runs 9.5 hours total. But I played for the whole thing in one day.
Wow.
With a dinner break. And I just really like that one, even though because it's so insane. And it's like 10 impossible chapters and they just get weirder. And it's from the teens, like 1915 through 16. So it has all this crazy stuff in it. And I just love seeing it. That's what I love. I love seeing almost any silent movie. But I think it's toughest when they go to war, like the big parade. It's very tough to go to the front because, like, oh no, you know, we're really in for it. But and another one I discovered when I was hired to play for was called Hearts of Humanity from 1919, and wow, boy, they go to war in that one. So that's hard. Don't really enjoy that. That's the opposite of the answer to your question.
You're very good at playing for trains. I always admire all of your train playing.
I love trains.
We also just got a question, again, from Dargan Gilmore, from their kids. Were there any injuries from the stunts during the filmmaking? Laura, might you happen to know?
Yeah, well, you know, Buster did not, as a rule, get injured during his stunts. He was very careful about planning them. All of those falls where it looks like he's landed on his neck or on his back, or all of those jumps where it seems like surely he must have hurt himself. In fact, they were very, very carefully planned. And during his entire career, there were only a couple of times when he was hurt during a stunt. And there was one particularly famous one in Sherlock Jr., where actually it was another train situation where there are these big spouts that they used to fill the steam trains with water. And it hit him so hard that he hit his neck on the back of the railroad track because of the force of the water. And he had a headache for a few weeks, but he never really thought of it until many years later. He went to the doctor, and the doctor asked him, "When did you break your neck?" And it turned out that he had broken his neck on this stunt in Sherlock Jr. and just went on filming because the show must go on. But he did not get injured during this movie, as far as I know, because the planning is very careful.
We also got a question from Dave's pal, Frank, who asks,
Frank.
how often and why do you switch keys during a movie?
I switch keys a lot because you can hear when you're stuck in a key. So I change keys because sometimes it just happens, and that's one of the things I love is chord progressions. So it's wonderful for me to do that. But actually, since I always recorded when I played, the first time I ever did that was like in, oh boy, years ago when I was playing for the Lodger, and I was in the key of F. And all of a sudden I was thinking, I've got to get out of this key. And I just broke out of the key and went to an unrelated key. It's like, that's it. That's what I want. So, and I have that on tape. In fact, it's on a CD collection that I have sold a tiny number of them. But that's okay. It's sort of just like a medal to do those CDs that I wear it on my chest. Like I make them and then I just wear one. And it's for me.
And I'd like to know, this question is for both of you. What sparked your passion for film? And I guess for Dave, what sparked your passion for music? Whoever wants to go first.
You go first.
Well, David and I both were taken to movies at the Cleveland Art Museum when we were very young. And in fact, I do remember seeing Go West with Buster Keaton there. Did you see that, Dave? Were you?
Yes, I did.
And they took us to all kinds of movies, and they didn't care whether we understood them or not. So they would take little kids to see Alexander Nevsky and Mr. Arkadin and all of these movies that even as an adult can be hard to understand sometimes. But we just got exposed to our parents' love of movies, basically.
Yes, and that show you're talking about, we saw The Balloonatic and Go West and Daydreams and The Navigator, and nobody played. So first of all, it was strange to be in a movie theater and there was no sound, because at the time there wasn't, guys, it just wasn't in existence really in Cleveland. But so at the museum, it was like a museum piece in a way to run a silent movie. And I always remember during Go West, the people laughed so loud. It was this huge laugh, and they roared, and it just like built to this laugh, and I was just stunned, and I felt like at one point I thought he was actually in the theater. I thought Buster Keaton was actually there because of how the people were laughing so hard. It was like this, whoa, it just sounded like this huge blast of laughing that I never forgot that.
Well, there was a period of time where somehow silent movies were more pure without the music. Like At the Cinémathèque Française, they never showed silent films with music when Henri Langlois was there because he thought that you could experience them better if they were completely silent. But that's not the way they were seen originally. That was like his own thing. And if you saw silent films with no music, it was because people either didn't think that they should have music or because they couldn't afford any music, which may have been the case at the art museum back in whatever year that was.
Now, this is really strange that me and my sister are talking to people at the same time. It's like, who would have thought that would ever be possible? We
This
can't
is a new world, David.
Who invented this stuff?
I have another question. Do each of you have a favorite Buster Keaton film?
Well, I have several favorites. I can't really say one is more favorite than another because when you see it, it starts to fade a little bit, and then you see another one that you've seen and it's back. And for instance, Battling Butler is a very good, and he directed that one too, but it's not a big epic. It's like Go West and Battling Butler are both really good, but they're not shown nearly as much. So you can't ever get the feeling back of the first time you ever saw it. Like when we were young teens, we were in my friend's basement, and he would get prints of films and we'd see them. Of course, I got 8mm stuff once in a while too. But that first time, like when we were in Cleveland, I thought, oh, this is the only time I'll ever see this. So I didn't even want to blink. And now it's like you can own everything he ever made, through any era. So, and The General, of course, I used to say to myself, was the greatest movie I ever made. But Our Hospitality, great, and The Three Ages, they both have like these laughs. They have these ideas.
I love The Three Ages.
It's so funny.
I also love Sherlock Jr. because it's the most surreal film I think that he ever made. And, we're really lucky that we can see, I think, all of Buster Keaton's films because he saved prints of them himself. And through a very convoluted relationship with a very strange movie collector named Raymond Rohauer, Raymond Rohauer made sure that all of his films were preserved and that they were seen, so that we're really lucky because they say between 70 and 80% of all silent films are lost. So the fact that we have all of Buster Keaton's is really amazing.
That is amazing.
Well, we're getting a couple of questions. So we just got a couple of questions. This one is for you, David. Can we hear about playing for ballet versus playing for a silent film? What are the differences?
Well, in the dance world, there are no silent movies. Nobody knows anything about that, or jazz. But in the dance world, they say jazz dance. But what they're referring to is what I call TV show dancing. They're not talking about a type of music that became audible in the world about 1917, and that there's records and all that, all straight down the line. But playing for ballet, a ballet class has a routine. So, and that's their mantra, which is to warm up all the muscles of their body systematically at the bar. And after they've done that, then they can go in the center and put some of the things together and expand. And the last thing is the Grand Allegro, where supposedly they're safe because all of their muscles are warmed up so they can try to do big jumps in time. But the difference for playing for ballet and a silent movie is you have to cut music to fit the combinations. So you never get, it's very rare to get the kind of duration that you get with playing for a picture. Although years ago, some ballet schools that are gone now, like for instance, there was one downtown called Ellis du Ballet, and it had a big studio, and so they had, if there were 20 people in a class, when you got to the Grand Allegro, they go diagonally across the room, and if people are going more than once, I might find myself playing for a pretty long time, like a big waltz, but mainly their goal is to evoke the classical ballets. So you need exercise-oriented material that reflects the rhythms that they're doing. Like they always say, oh, your goal is it's supposed to look like the music is coming from your body. It's like but nobody ever says, what music was it that looked like it was coming from my body? Who wrote it? It just has to, I pick the music, and they say, how do you do that, Dave? How did you pick that? And it looked like, it was just like, oh, I don't know, so you're cutting things. So in other words, nobody but a dancer would listen to music in the form it has to be put in to work with class, unless you're a dancer, because everything is cut. You cut Beethoven and Chopin and all of his friends from all the different eras. And of course, I can improvise the whole thing too, depending on the mentality of the person that's playing. And sometimes if I'm backed into a corner and they say, okay, introduction, it's like, and I'm shuffling through my books, I couldn't find it, I'll just make it up, They don't care really, they just once, they're not going to notice. As long as it fits, they gotta go da 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 da. Do I need to read music to do that? No, I don't need to do that. It's not hard for me to do that.
Well, we also got 2 questions. I think this might be for you, Laura. Since the film was a financial flop, how was he able to convince people to support him again? And also, this is Daniel Inger's questions. He also wants to know, how were they able to distribute such a pristine print of the film?
So the answer to the first question is that after he made this film, his contract was sold to MGM. He was no longer an independent studio in himself. So MGM was the person who then put up the money for his subsequent films, because he was still a very big name. He was still a big star. It was just, everyone is always dissecting whether, picture A is funnier than picture B. I mean, comedians always have that issue. It doesn't mean that, this Adam Sandler movie is demonstrably better or worse, but Adam Sandler is still a star and they will still pay him to make movies. So that's the answer to that question. And the second one is that there's some excellent original material for these Keaton films. They are originally on nitrate, which is highly flammable. They get transferred to safety film. And this is a digital restoration where they clean up all the scratches and dust. They heighten the clarity of the picture. This is really a beautiful, beautiful print. I was watching it on my big TV, and I was almost expecting it to be a little pixelated or whatever. And it's very sharp and clear and beautiful. So they've digitized it in a gigantic file so that everything really looks excellent.
And we have one more question from George Buonocore. Were there many rehearsals for the storm scenes or done in one take? If the latter, how was it planned? And they have a follow-up question as well of what happened to the other actors, if you have an answer for that.
Ernest Torrance, who played his father, I believe died fairly young, didn't he, David?
I think he lived to be like 56 only.
Yeah, I think he died in the early 1930s. I mean, his career was mostly in the silent era. And although he's very funny in this movie, he's also terrifying in movies like Tolerable David, where, he's really a brutal patriarch of the mountain family. So he had a very wide range as far as his acting. The actress Marion Byron, who plays his girlfriend, did not have much of a career. As always, leading ladies can be kind of interchangeable unless they're extremely talented. And Buster really didn't care that much because he looked on the actresses as more props, actually, than individuals. And there was a first part of a question, too, which I've forgotten.
Were the storms planned?
Oh, the storm scene. Everything is planned very, very carefully, but clearly there are certain things that would have to be done in one take. Like, the one that fascinates me is that house that splits apart into all of those individual boards. That the wind blows and then it just collapses into this pile of lumber. I mean, obviously they would have to do a lot of rehearsing, probably with models, I would think, to make sure that it would work. But then they probably only had one take of it. And the boxes blowing off the truck that's going by, maybe they would do that a few times. Other things may have been done repeatedly, but certainly the one shot where the house falls on him, which still is, completely breathtaking. They measured out the space that he was going to stand in, and then the house fell on him with just one take. They aren't going to do that again.
And I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. We did get a question in the chat from Desiree. How do you find all of the great old tunes you fold into your playing?
Well, a lot. Well, I play the blues. So I play the blues in Harlem Stride, and for a comedy, that's a really great thing to know how to play the blues. So you can do it all kinds of ways, all speeds, all different keys and major and minor keys. So automatically it's 10 songs just out of the blues. Then the main tune, that I can't think of the name of, that's on the wall of the prison. That
The Prisoner's Song.
The Prisoner's Song. That song was a record in 1924 by Vernon Dalhart, and it sold a huge number of copies. But so that one is another one that it's such a basic tune that you can mess around with it and play it all kinds of ways. And then I was practicing with a bugle call rag. I played the trumpet a little bit, and I was playing with a record of bugle call rag, and it has 2 sections. So I played it on the piano, and it's like, I want this. I want to play this. So I put that in after I played the Prisoner's Song. So I used the Prisoner's Song for the opening credits and at the very end. And then when the storm starts, and I played it faster, and then I went into bugle call rag after that. And then when you see the girl on the house, then I winged it from there, where it's just action, dramatic action. So instead of playing Harlem Stride on that part, I went for more just plain drama excitement on that part. And then I played Ain't She Sweet, because you suggested I do that for the little baby in the carriage when he's playing the ukulele. And it's like, that is a good idea. And so that's one I already know, so I didn't have to learn that. And so mainly from records, listening to records and thinking about the year that, for instance, the opening title of the film says Muddy Waters. And so in our day, you think of the blues singer Muddy Waters, but actually there was a song, and I thought about it, called Muddy Water from 1926. And there, so sheet music and records, and that's where it all comes from. So I thought, well, there isn't time to, he couldn't really mean to play the song, but it had already been around for a year. So possibly it was just a joke. It was the opening gag of the movie is to bring up the song, the words of which are about the confusion, the confusing of romantic relationships and that kind of thing. So maybe for the audience of its day, it's like, oh, I see where this is going before you even see a person,
David, until 1 minute ago, you were the only person on earth that got that joke. And now we all can get it.
Well, all you have to do is be a misfit and it'll work out real good, maybe.
I always love it when they show the title of a song and then you play it. That's really satisfying to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, they are always cueing you. Silent pictures always cue the accompanist. They try and help you.
That's right. Because there were plenty of people much less skilled than you that played for silent films.
Yes, I always love the swipe that Eric von Stroheim takes at accompanists in Greed, where, is there time for me to explain this?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, when Mac and Trina, they go out to sit on the sewer, and he has a little concertina, and he says, well, what should I play? And she says, well, I forget the first one she says to him, and she says, no, should I play Hearts and Flowers? And he says, no. And it's another song, and it's like both of those things were, the bane of moviegoers' existence in 1923. It's like they sold 1 million copies of the sheet music of Hearts and Flowers.
Well, and just to conclude, I guess the final question would be, do each of you have a favorite film and favorite director? I know that's a really tough question.
It's too hard. Well, it's really never about one movie.
Or if you want to share some of your favorite films, favorite directors, just so our audience gets to know your taste a little more and what you're interested in.
Well, of course, there's Harold Lloyd comedies and Charlie Chaplin comedies, but Harry Langdon, some of his stuff is really a scream. Then dramatic films. There are wonderful, some of Mary Pickford's films are wonderful, and there's many wonderful European films. I like movies that are, it might sound odd, but when you go before like 1919, that's the year that I say to myself was when movies started to do what you want them to, which is a tradition which still exists now, that when a movie starts, the bigger the success, the more the movie does what you want it to right from the start. It's like they won't even show any opening titles on some movies now because they just go right to something. So that started like in 1919, but when you go back farther, the movies less and less do that. They won't do what you want them to. You have to see, well, what is, where am I going here? How long are we going to see this lady? And so that's fascinating, but I don't know that it turns out to be favorites. But for instance, we just saw one last week, a Danish film from 1913 called Ballettens Daughter, and it was about a woman who was a dancer, and it had a long scene in a ballet class of 1913. It's like, oh, look at that.
What about you, Laura?
Well, my easy answer is always Sunset Boulevard. that there's so much I love about that movie because it's set in the 1950s, but it looks back to the silent era, and it's kind of a cynical view of Hollywood. It has great acting, great dialogue, a great film noir-y kind of atmosphere, and it's a film I just never get tired of seeing.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't know you were talking about any era. Yeah.
Well, I decided to answer that way.
Good. Good. Well, I can't make my brain go there fast enough right now.
Well,
But
you're
that's
exhausted. You've been
Huh?
playing the piano forever.
Boy, am I tired.
Well, thank you both for being part of this event. David, for your wonderful music. Laura,
Thank
for your
you.
wonderful film
And
curation.
thank you, Maria, for making this happen.
Thank you for going on this adventure with me. This was completely new to me as well. So glad we could do it together. But I also want to thank the audience as well for being a part of this very special edition of the NCMA Film Club. And we really hope you enjoyed the virtual screening, enjoyed the music. And
please tell the museum how much you loved it.
yes, we love feedback. So please tell us, give us any feedback you want. And we really appreciate your support. And anything else you want to say, Laura or David, to our attendees?
Just thank you and hope to see you next time.
Yes, that I second the motion.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.